morning. Thanks for inviting me. Well, in the early morning, I'm going to talk something a little bit heavy, which is medical. And I'm going to talk about something that will disturb you a little bit, but hopefully to set you thinking. I have entitled my talk as 3 Steps Ahead. And this is one of the most difficult things in medicine, where you want to be 3 steps ahead, way before a stroke happened, right? Way before cancer happened, way before anything happened. How can we be 3 steps ahead? Let's just dive in and I'll show you a very typical scene. You can see this in our clinic. You can see every time your parents, you go to the clinic, and you will notice this thing. They are smiling. And I call this the fatal smile. It's called a fatal smile because when you see the doctor, especially when he takes your blood pressure, we make an assumption because your blood pressure is now good, normal. So we assume it must have been good since the last time you came, right? And then we will have to assume that you will be good until the next visit. And therefore we smile. And because there is good control, we won't get a stroke. We won't get a heart attack. We won't have anything. But is it true? Look at the number of publications that tells us something not quite right. If you were to look at this chart, it actually tells you the number of admission to the hospital for stroke. And notice it's only 2,000. So you could just try and extrapolate where is 2017. This is our figure. Can you imagine that not only we have strokes increasing at nobody's business, but strokes is happening in the young one, below 45. 1 in 4 are below 45. And that includes a lot of us, isn't it? So when we look at this, we know something is wrong because effective treatment has come in, but the trend hasn't been arrested. Why I look at it this way was in the year 2000, I decided to then launch the company with the invention, trying to address this problem. You see, in Singapore, if you were to look at the cause of death, it can be stroke, can be heart attack, even kidney failure, which is the commonest. They actually consist of 35%. That means 1 in 3, or more than 1 in 3 person in Singapore who die of heart attack, stroke, or kidney failure. And this is even bigger than cancer. And the one that underlies this is the hypertension, which is high blood pressure. In our layman's term, it's called high blood pressure or hypertension. And 25%, as I said, are below 45 years old. So if you were to look at admission, just now when I showed you the slide, it was admission. We have not counted people who have stroke and died at home, people who have stroke and went to see the Chinese physician, people who have a stroke and did nothing at home. We just count the number of admission. Then we have 1 in every 45 minutes. So after this morning, we probably have 3 more strokes in Singapore. That's a reality. And the number doubles every 4 to 5 years. Every 4 to 5 years, the number of stroke doubles because our aging population is increasing. The number of people getting high blood pressure when you're young is increasing. Heart attack is estimated to be 1 in 3 hours. Now, in Singapore, the figures is going down to 1 in 1.5 hours. We have 1 fresh heart attack. Kidney failure, every day we have 4 to 5 new kidney dialysis patients. Every day. So how big is the problem? The problem is huge because you look at the population here in the world, 1 billion actually are going and walking around with high blood pressure. And you increase this over the next 20 years. So you can imagine, 1 in 3 person in the world will eventually become hypertensive. Now, so are we doing it right? Because we have so much work done, we have so much medicine and research done into how to treat hypertension, but we have not arrested. the problem that hypertension brings. So are we doing it right? I ask myself this every time I sit behind my desk in the clinic. I look at the patient and I realize I also did the fatal smile that killed them. Where is the missing link? I started challenging the norm. And that starts with reflection, one of your first theme, reflection. Now, I started looking at high blood pressure, or person who is having blood pressure. How does the blood pressure behave throughout the 24 hours? If you were to look at a glimpse of a slit of your window and you would see this kind of thing, you would guess, well, most likely it's a woman, beautiful, beautiful woman, maybe have some outrageous hair, but that's about all that we know. But the truth is, we have missed the whole thing. This is what it looks like. Or if you were to look at blood pressure from this angle, and you look at the clinic blood pressure, when you come to the clinic, we take your blood pressure. This is the view of the clinic blood pressure. But the truth is, it comes from there. It doesn't come from where you think. So when we look at the 24-hour blood pressure and we plot it into a graph, and we look at the way the blood pressure fluctuates, we will see that the normal person fluctuates within a certain band. And when you sleep at night, the blood pressure actually drops 10-15%, and then goes up again when the sun comes out, up another 10-15%. So is the diastolic pressure, and this is the heart rate. As it fluctuates in the day, above 80, 90, but when you sleep, it can drop even up to 50. So the blood pressure, the heart rate has a rhythm. It has a certain rhythm and certain circadian rhythm, which is the body clock. But when we take the blood pressure pattern across the board, let's say, for example, if I take all of you and every one of you has a recording of the blood pressure, not everyone will have a normal pattern. In fact, there are many types of patterns, and these are some of them. One of these, when you see the doctor, the pressure goes up. Then when you go home, it's actually quite normal. We call this the white coat. Nowadays, there's no white coat for doctors. We don't wear white coats, so we call it office hypertension, which is clinic hypertension. We look at people who have blood pressure that's high in the systolic, which is high, but the diastolic is normal. We have people who are normal here, but high here. And then we have very strange patterns like people who only have high blood pressure at night. Nobody is going to go to your house at 3 a.m. and take your blood pressure, isn't it? Or your parents' blood pressure. We are missing a whole lot of these people whose pressures are at night and nobody knows until you get a stroke. We have people whose blood pressure are high, but they have a nice circadian rhythm, which is the biological clock, just like the normal one. But there are others who are behaving like a straight line, which is actually the non-dipper. We call them the non-dipper. Why are we looking at all these patterns? Because every pattern carries its own risk of heart attack and stroke. Just for example, the non-dippers are present in a lot of diabetics. They are 3 to 5 times the risk of stroke if you don't change them. So when we look at those patterns, we look at results, we found that there's another pattern that was described. It's called a morning surge. There are people who wake up in the morning, for the next 3 hours, the blood pressure is very high. Then the rest of the day, you are normal. And these people actually present with a rupture of the vessel. And the best example that I can give you is our late Mrs. Lee, who had morning hypertension when we noticed it on a watch. So ABPM pattern is another name for that 24-hour blood pressure. ABPM stands for ambulatory blood pressure pattern. So when you have a pattern, it carries a different risk of your cardiovascular event, or what we call stroke. Then if you were to bring the pattern back to normal, it actually reduces the stroke or the risk of having cardiovascular event. And this is actually the evidence-based medicine. And I will show you that how we can customize treatment so that we can catch them beforehand. You see, in the publication that was done some time ago, in fact, It's a very big publication from Ireland, 2005. They did 5,000 over patients and they follow them up, average of 8 years. But the longest one, as I say, average is 8 years, but the longest person is 21 years in this trial. And you look at the risk of having cardiovascular death, that means you actually die from heart attack or stroke. And they look at the clinic blood pressure. All of us thought this is the holy truth, the gospel truth, because, oh wow, the blood pressure goes up as the diastolic and systolic goes up. Well, the risk of stroke goes up and death goes up. But when we did the 24-hour blood pressure, this is the truth. It is the night pressure average overnight that is very, very strong in determining whether you get it or not. So if someone wants to know one single blood pressure that is most important to predict the risk is the night pressure. But following that, the 24-hour average pressure, the day pressure, and not the clinic blood pressure. So we have missed the whole thing for a long time. If you were to look at studies done, they will show you that the reverse dipper, the people who are actually very low, the people who are very high at night, they are called the reverse dipper. Those who are very low at night, they call it the extreme dipper. And we describe this as a J curve in terms of stroke. Those who are very high at night, your risk of stroke is so much higher compared to the non-dippers and the dippers. And if your blood pressure drops too low, you actually get a stroke. You actually develop a stroke. Or if you look at the different patterns, depending on what is called ischemic stroke. Ischemic stroke is when the blood vessel gets blocked by a clot or a narrowing. Then the blood cannot flow through your brain. You get a brain attack, just like a heart attack. If you were to look at extreme dippers, and you look at the normal ones, the extreme dippers are the ones that are very low at night. The blood pressure drops very low at night, and they actually develop stroke. That is blocked. But if you are looking at people who are blood pressure is very high at night, they get rupture, which is intracranial hemorrhage, which means the blood vessel bursts. And then there are very strange people who actually come and study and say, now, when does all this happen? How can we prevent? So they started charting the people who have what we call the hours of the day. And they found that, between 6 to 9, 9 to 12 is the worst. That's the time when you wake up, the first 3 hours. That's when most things happen, 60, 70% happens. So some wise guy came along and said, I think we should just not wake up in the morning. We just wake up in the afternoon, yeah? And then schools can start at night, which is not bad. But it's not true, because someone actually did an adjustment and show you, no matter what time you wake up, it doesn't matter what time you wake up, the first 3 hours is your danger zone. And that's something we have not realized. So how do you measure blood pressure over 24 hours? Well, traditionally you have something like that, which look exactly like a suicide bomber. You know, you carry a thing like that, you have a strap going around with a wire. Imagine wearing this in your MRT and you put a little overall on it with the wire sticking out. In Moscow or in St. Petersburg, you'll be in trouble. Or you prefer something like that, which is very challenging. We want to replace the whole thing. And this is just to show you, this is a typical device that you can have, which costs $4,000 to $6,000. It's called an ambulatory blood pressure device with a pump, with all the wires. I'm going to show you, this is a young man. And after 24 to 48 hours of taking out the device, you look at his hand. Imagine if it's your grandmother and your old man. You're going to get bruises, you're going to get rashes, your skin will slough off, and you will never repeat it anymore. So it is not ideal, but it is very important. So we need to take away the cuff. I need to take away that cuff and then to know how to measure it over 24 hours without the patient knowing. And we came up with this thing called the B-Pro, which is, first of all, a new method of measuring blood pressure. We don't use the cuff. We have to use something else. We use the arterial waveform, which is the pulse. See, the present method, if you don't realize, is about 105. In fact, now it's about 107 years already. That's how old it is, the pressure device that we have been using. And when we have this kind of new device that doesn't use a pump or cuff, when you submit for FDA, there's no precedent. There's no predicate device. FDA doesn't know who should I compare my thing to. Where do I find something to compare with? It was a big, big challenge. We had to invent a device to test our device. That was how we submit to FDA. And it's a very virgin field for validation. And we really rocked the boat because the doctors are using it for 105 years using this. And here we are saying you don't need this. You take away the cow. I'll show you some example of people who have put on, this is recording by the watchers, and how the doctors, I won't go into the detail, but the doctors use the pattern and treat. And this is before treatment. You can see after treatment, we got back the pattern, we got back the dip, we got back their normal range. Another patient, this is horrendously high. If you don't do anything, about 200, you can be sure you'll get a stroke within the next few days. We treated, it came down, but you could see she is a typical non-dipper. So if I have corrected this further, if I didn't correct this, I have not solved the problem. The person still has a problem, and we don't realize it unless you do a 24-hour ambulatory pressure. So finding the solution is what I call refresh. How do we find that solution? It's looking at it from a different angle. And we have come up with the first 24-hour device that uses the pulse wave, which is the arterial wave you can see here, when you connect them to a pattern, and we record this, and we have broken the world record. We actually got an FDA approval in 6 weeks. It normally takes 2 years. And because of the amount of validation and clinical publication, we have the approval in 6 weeks. So if you look at the usual one, as I said, it looks like that, right? Just now we saw, now we have come up with this. But we haven't stopped there. You see, what we have done is we are actually looking at the disease from a different angle. When I mentioned we were 3 steps ahead, what do I mean by 3 steps ahead? When we look at people who are actually having a stroke, and then you need to treat, and then you need to monitor, you already are at the end of this spectrum. But before that happens, if you can catch them and you intervene, that will be better. But before you even catch them and intervene, you might still want to predict, prognosticate, which is to predict who will get it. Among the whole lot of you here, I know who will be likely to get it because you are high at night, because you are a non-dipper. So I can predict. Then even earlier, we went for screening so that we are diagnostic. We go up and screen people who doesn't have it, and then we literally predict the outcome. So this is very obvious. Yeah, we are looking at here. What we are doing is that we are trying to come to this place, which is just way, way, way before it happened, 3 steps ahead. So not only we are 3 steps ahead in that sense that we have the technology, but we are looking at even as we did the first generation, which is the G1, we already have gone on to G2, which is the wireless one. It's now in UK, Australia, China, Malaysia, and then US this year. People are using a wireless, cloud-based G2 model. And what you saw on the computer just now, where you see those waveforms, the whole thing has been strung onto the watch, and you actually see it on the watch. And this is actually G2. While the G2 is out, we have already gone ahead to do another model, which is G3. This is how it works. In G2, the nurse will put it on the patient, and then after that, he goes home, he sleeps over 24 hours. Either he returns the watch or he downloads it, and it goes to the cloud, and then you get a report. And it is not only a hard copy, but a soft copy, anywhere available. And then we are now moving on to consumer, which is you and I, our parents at home, people who want to know We want to have a watch that you can call your own. That one is actually for doctors to put on the patient. This one is again wireless, cloud-based, and we hope to come out end of this year or beginning of next year. And this is really what we call a sales and service model, which means you actually subscribe to a service. Now, when you harness the power of intellectual property, which is here, and technology, I call it Renewal. You actually change things and look at things a different way. So when we look at invention, which many of you may not be into it, but some of you might like, we always hear of people going from ideas to reality. And ideas to reality, in many of us, it's like, oh my, it's a dream, and it will come true, and it will be a straight line, and we'll just get over it. I also thought that was the way, until I realized it was a roller coaster. Before you get into that area, first of all, you got to get a proof of concept. To prove that it works, you have to prove before you make it that it works. After you prove the concept, you haven't done anything, you got to get funding. You become a professional beggar. You got to beg for money because it costs a lot of money. And then before you thought you could get everything down, you got to do a prototype, which is actually something that will work and put on the patient. And when we thought we have prototype finished, we got to, oh dear, I have to go validation, which means I have to prove that it works to the regulatory body. I have to do what we call clinical trials. We have to put on patients, big trials, done by other people, third party, to publish papers. And when we thought that has all been done, we sent for regulatory, which is the FDA, the HSA, the CE, all this. We thought that would be the end because this is the final hurdle. And then we came up with a problem after that. Everything else is in place. The doctor doesn't accept it. The patient loves it. The doctor doesn't accept it because it rocks the boat. Because I don't know what is it. That's how the truth of the doctor. In fact, I've learned a little, through my years, this is 16 years, on this technology. I will tell you something about doctors. They are quite a funny creature. The one feature that they have is the more ignorant they are, the more arrogant they are. So the more you don't know, the louder he will speak. And they have a problem accepting. So it took us quite a few years to get the world to accept and use and put it on the patient. Okay, so I will leave you with a thought that is one of my favorite authors. It's called The Illiterate of the 21st Century. We find the century itself becoming more and more blurred because literally we are going to travel across time very fast. It will be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. It's a bit like reflection, refresh, and renew. Thank you.